It is believed that on this day in 1896, industrialist Henry Ford took to the streets of Detroit in the self-designed and driven automobile, his very first quadricycle. It was essentially a frame mounted upon 4 bicycle wheels and powered by a 2-cylinder 4-horsepower gasoline engine. There was no steering wheel, brakes or a reverse gear. The quadricycle had 2 driving speeds, that is 10 miles per hour and 20 miles per hour, and a doorbell button as a horn. With this successful test drive, Ford launched into fine-tuning and mass-producing the automobile, and the rest is history. On this day in 1913, English suffragette Emily Davison suffered fatal injuries after throwing herself in front of King George V's racehorse at the Derby in Epsom. She was a staunch supporter of women's rights and actively campaigned all her life to give women the right to vote, which was still a right reserved for male members of society then. Some dispute the motive of Davison's reckless act. Was it suicide or protest? Was she simply attempting to cross the track? Many believe it was an act of protest, but she didn't have martyrdom in mind. Her act on June 4th, 1913 would go down in the history of political protest. On this day in 1940, the Dunkirk evacuation of Allied troops came to an end. The operation, which began on May 26th, saved the lives of 198,000 British and 140,000 French and Belgian troops in what was otherwise a military disaster. Allied troops found themselves trapped on the beaches of Dunkirk, cut off by Germans on all sides. There was heavy bombardment too from above and scant options for shelter. The evacuation was carried out by military vessels and civilian boats and air cover by English forces, and was nothing less than a miracle. 31 years ago on this day, Chinese troops ordered by the communist regime brutally cracked down upon protesters in Beijing's Tiananmen Square, breaking up protests calling for democratic reforms. The protests, which began in April, carried on through May. At first, the Chinese government didn't respond with force, but on 3rd to 4th June, troops began to move towards Tiananmen Square, opening fire, crushing and arresting protesters to regain control of the area. News or discussion about the bloody crackdown is strictly controlled in China.